Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Schall. Today, I'm joined by the co-hosts of the Locked On Wizards podcast to talk about the main implication of the Bradley Beal trade for the New York Knicks. As I see it, will Kristaps Porzingis be next? Will he be a Knick? What would the trade look like? We'll talk about it right now.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. If you want to be an everydayer, then all you have to do is subscribe on YouTube, hit that notifications bell so you never ever miss an episode. Remember to like and comment because it helps us out a whole lot, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. But who's shilling for subs? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. Today, I'm joined by Ed Oliver and Brandon Scott, the fantastic hosts of the Locked On Wizards podcast. As I mentioned earlier, to talk about everything Kristaps Porzingis. You get a really interesting perspective on his season, where he's effective offensively now, how it differs than when he was on the Knicks, and what he's like as a defender, and why he might even be underrated on that end of the floor. All that next on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, as promised, we are joined by the fantastic duo over at Locked On Wizards, Ed Oliver, Brandon Scott. I appreciate you guys making some time. I know there's a little bit of news in the Wizards community over the weekend that you guys, we could talk about it real quick. You guys are telling me you're both pretty happy that it's over, even if you're not thrilled about the return for Bradley Beal.
Yeah, very happy that he's off the books. Obviously, getting that Supermax contract off the books is a major plus for this team because we both feel like a rebuild is much needed and the 202. But the return was very underwhelming. Just the fact that Bradley Beal had so much power over where he wanted to go, what we got in return. And, looking at the return, I feel like we could have got a lot more. But, it is what it is. And you kind of got to look forward to a rebuild. And, again, getting that money off the books is a big plus.
Yeah, Ed, I'm curious how you think this potentially shifts the Wizards' perspective going forward, because there's a certain former Knick, once reviled in New York, but also once loved in New York, maybe to be loved in New York again. Kristaps Porzingis, who frankly was, I don't know if you guys would agree, but just look at the numbers, was fantastic for Washington a year ago. If KP decides to opt in, do you think this move off of Beal makes it a necessity that the Wizards move off of him in an effort to just be as bad as possible this year? Or do you think they're open to keeping KP for another year?
I think this makes the rebuild even more likely. I mean, it's going to be a rebuild anyway, but if KP does opt in, I do see them trading him before the draft to load up on more picks for sure. I just think the Bradley Beal trade, just you look at the offer that we got back in return. Of course, Bradley Beal controlled that with the no trade clause. There were better offers on the table from the Miami Heat. They were reportedly going to offer multiple first round picks, but we ended up with Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, and no first round picks at all. We end up with multiple 5 to 6 second round picks. So that just shows the direction of the team that they're trying to rebuild. So I think everybody's on the table. Kuz is most likely going to be gone. Porzingis is going to be gone. Everybody on the roster that is really over the age of 25 or 26, I would say, is gone. Or anybody that's not on a rookie contract most likely is going to be traded. We're just going to take on bad contracts. So this is going to be hopefully not a Sixers style trust the process rebuild, but Porzingis definitely is going to be moved for a first round pick. I hope we don't get fleeced again and only end up with second round picks when we do trade Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, well, we can talk about the Sam. Knicks fans are also hoping for a non-process style rebuild because they want to keep that sweet Wizards first round pick that could convey in the next couple of years. But I guess, Brandon, on that note, I would think that Wizards first round pick in terms of a Knicks Washington trade would maybe lose a little bit of appeal to them now, because you guys can, instead of operating from the perspective of, it'd be nice to get that pick back because we can use it to add to the core of Beal, Kuz, and KP. Now it's like, hey, if we're going to suck the next 3 years anyways, like that pick doesn't necessarily have a lot of value. We're certainly not in the business of trading first round picks right now. I was going to propose to you guys a potential deal if the Knicks want to go down this road, and we can talk about if they should want to go down that road. But if they want to go down the Porzingis road of Mitchell Robinson and the Wizards getting their first round pick back, do you think that would still be appealing to Washington? Or are you kind of in the same camp as Ed? You guys are just trying to get as many picks as humanly possible at this point.
I would think that would be appealing, but again, I'm with Ed. I think that we're trying to get any kind of asset we can at this point. Picks, expiring contracts. I do see within the next couple of years us getting a lot of bad contracts and getting picks that's kind of thrown into the package with that. But yeah, this front office has proven that they know how to evaluate talent in the draft. They know how to accumulate picks. So I definitely think we're going to trade everybody. We're going to try to get sign and trade for Kuz. You're going to try and get value for KP, and look at the other players like Denny Avdia, considering he's on an expiring contract. He is, and Monte Morris, Alon Wright. They're on contract deals. So we have a lot of flexibility. We could, but right now we definitely looking to accumulate as many picks as we can.
And Ed, I guess from your perspective, what do you think would be an appealing package coming back from the Knicks? Because New York has a lot of flexibility, right? They have the Washington pick, they have the Milwaukee pick, they have the Pistons pick, they have the Dallas pick in a year. They own all of their picks going forward after this season, and they have some young talents, guys like Quinn Grimes, and I think Mitchell Robinson. If he was not in the trade directly, he would have to be redirected to a third team because there's no world where the Knicks would keep him, Randall, and KP. But is there, from your perspective, an appealing package from the Knicks? Like, is there one young guy you'd say, all right, this would be a great get, or just a whole bunch of picks for Kristaps Porzingis theoretically, or you don't really see a deal between the two teams?
Well, the Wizards were reportedly interested in Emmanuel quickly right before the trade deadline this past season. So that's a young prospect, up-and-coming guy that played well for you guys at the point. Kind of a combo guard, more of a scoring guard, but he had some big games, had 38 against Boston or went crazy a couple games against the Celtics. So he's an intriguing young prospect. If we can get him in a first-round pick, or if we're really just salary dumping guys just to get our pick back, worst-case scenario would be taking on an Evan Fournier deal or something like a Derrick Rose deal just to make the salaries match. But I do like quickly. And then there was the rumor that came out a couple of weeks or last week that me and Brandon had a show on where Obi Toppin was involved in a trade too. And I'm intrigued by him too. He's a young athletic guy, prospect, still has to work on his shot from the 3-point line, but he's super athletic. He's a lob threat, runs the floor really well. So quickly is a guy that I'm really keeping my eye on out of all the young guys on your team. I do like Quentin Grimes too, but I like quickly the most. And RJ Barrett, I don't see you guys putting RJ Barrett in the deal, so I think quickly is probably the most realistic guy out of your young core.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating debate because I do think there's a world where, just from a financial perspective, the Knicks bringing KP and presumably like another season like this, KP is going to be looking at like 35 to 40 million in terms of annual salary going forward with the cap escalating. And there's a world where the Knicks are just like, hey, like we're going to have to move off of quickly anyways. Like, let's just do it directly in this deal. Personally, he is someone I would really not want the Knicks to part with. I would much prefer an Obi Toppin being in this trade. I would much prefer for it to be like a picks heavy package. But I'm sure the Knicks are operating, if they were to go after Kristaps Porzingis in a world where they still want a package, whether it's a Julius Randle or an RJ Barrett and some of these other guys for picks going forward. So there might have to be that balance between one of those young guys and a pick or two in that kind of trade. And I'm fascinated to see what his value is with only the 1 year left on his contract. But I also want to know from you guys what type of player the Knicks would potentially be getting. So this was a stat. It was from our friend over at Knicks Film School, Jonathan Macri, that just blew my mind. You guys essentially had a top 5 offense this season when Kristaps Porzingis was on the floor and a bottom 5 offense when he was off the floor. Brandon, what made KP so transformative for Washington this season?
Well, many things. I mean, as you know, he was healthy. And when he's healthy, he's proven. Oh, absolutely. When he's healthy, he has proven that he can play at an all-star level. In my opinion, he was an all-star this year because he's that modern day big. He can shoot from 3, he can defend, he can put the ball on the floor. But the big difference between the KP now and the KP when he was first drafted in New York is, he was trying to do too much in New York. He's learned how to utilize his body now. So I think that had a lot to do with him being healthy, is not trying to do so much, knowing the limitations of his body. Because look, once you're 7 foot, you're susceptible to injury. So he was very smart with his body. But wow, man, he was electrifying this year. He was a quiet leader for this locker room. Because on one hand, you want to say that Bradley Beal should have been a leader, but really, there was 2 people that really emerged as leaders in his locker room, which was Kyle Kuzma and Kristaps Porzingis. He was kind of a quiet leader. He became a fan favorite very fast. So it's not an easy thought losing KP, because I've grown accustomed to loving KP. He's been a fan favorite, and again, when he is healthy, he can play some basketball. So.
All right, guys, we'll be back with Ed and Brandon in just a sec to continue talking about KP's offensive game, including how he could potentially fit in with what would all of a sudden be a deep starting lineup. But first, I wanted to tell you that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's so easy to get caught up in everything everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need from yourself. When we spend all of our time giving, it can leave us feeling stretched, thinned, and burned out. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. I personally really benefited from therapy in my life because it really just genuinely helps you be a little bit more self-aware. And you obviously have some problems in your life that you can't control. I found in my life, therapy helps you control what you can. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime at no additional charge. You can find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Ed, what did you think about his game? Because in New York, I remember him, especially before, well, I guess there only was in New York before he tore the ACL, but he was just a monster athlete, right? Someone who could run the floor. You would throw lobs that you're like, all right, he has no business getting to that. And he would find a way to get there, had that handle, could go one-on-one. We really got to see that post-Melo. Obviously, like it feels like 4-point range, like where he can shoot from 35 feet and in. Was he still that type of guy in Washington? And I don't know how much you got to watch of him early in his career, but where do you think his game has really made a leap, his year and a half in the Capitol?
Just looking at his 3-point percentage, he shot 38% from the 3-point line this year, and that was off of 5 attempts. So he shot the 3 ball really well, 23 points a game, 8 boards a game as well. I had a 40-point game against the Timberwolves. He had multiple games where he hit at least 2 or 3 threes, really stretched the floor. In the first half, he led our team in first quarter points. I got to see where he ranked in first quarter points because in the first half, there were some games in the first half where he would have about 15 to 20 points. In the second half, he would end up with having 25 points. Of course, the question with him is physicality and kind of just, the physicality in the paint. So you kind of need another big around him that's kind of, take on the physicality and more of the rebounding so he can kind of stay out there around the 3-point line. So he still is that unicorn, the nickname that he got in New York. He's more of a 3-point shooting big, but he does post up still, but he's still, he's not going to back anybody down. Of course, we know who he is. He's more of a free throw line, mid post, knock down threes, pick and pop kind of guy. The lobs weren't there. He wasn't much of a lob threat, but he still finished really, really well around the rim. But the 3-point shooting really was impressive. The shooting was impressive. Getting to the free throw line was impressive as well. Just looking at some of the numbers as well. Free throws, he was 18th in the NBA for free throws with 354. Box plus minus was 19th. Player efficiency rating, he was 17th in the NBA as well. And he's still a really impressive shot blocker as well. He was 12th in blocks and 8th in blocks per game with 1.5. And then another nerdy stat of all players to average at least 3 post-ups per game during the regular season. Kristaps ranking amongst those guys. Points per possession, he was second with 1.18. Effective field goal rating was 58%, and he was second among bigs. Free throw frequency he had 23%, which was 4th, and he was the 90th percentile in efficiency, trailing only Nikola Jokic. So that's how good he was posting up. So the first half he would get the ball, we would make it a point to give him the ball in the post, and then the second half he would just disappear in games. So that's the big question mark that with Kristaps Porzingis, and then of course guarding guys, moving his feet. But he had a great year. Like Brandon said, there were at times where he was an all-star level player, and he was healthy. That was huge. The only reason why he missed a lot of games towards the end was because we were basically tanking when we knew we were not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, the post-up stuff is exciting for me because maybe I could look at the stats and it's possible I wasn't watching quite as closely back then. I'm totally misremembering it, but I don't think he had that kind of impact in the post just because he was rail thin when he was on the Knicks. And I know he made it a point of emphasis when he was in Dallas to put on weight, and some people thought that was the cause of the injuries, but maybe very similar to Mitchell Robinson, New York. I don't know, Brandon, maybe you could speak on this. Like has he kind of found that balance where he is toned, but maybe not too heavy, and he's able to stay healthy, but like how did he make an impact in the post? Like, is that mostly like short turnarounds? Is that jump hooks? Is that like just like catch and finish? Like what was he doing so well there?
Well, again, getting to the point is he listened to his body. Like I said, he's not pushing himself, trying to be that. He got the name unicorn because he was trying to do a little bit of everything.
He would try to dunk on 2 people at times. Like, it was crazy, which was cool, but yeah.
But he listened to his body. Looking at the post, He knows how to utilize his size and his height. He's not going to be able to back down on a lot of these bigger centers. So he utilizes, turn around and shooting those jumpers. And this jumper was money. So, and he used mismatches, and he really found the right shot in the post. So no, he knows what his role was, and he knows how to utilize his size. And that's what makes him so successful, because 7-footers, a lot of them just don't know how to utilize their size. He knew how to utilize mismatches. And again, that 3-point shot and the ability to back down and turn on and hit that J was just money last year.
Ed, what did you see from him as a passer? He's going through his stats. That was the one thing that stood out to me. Had never averaged over 2 assists per game in his career. He was at 3 in his half season in Washington, just under 3 this full season in Washington. Did you see a leap from him there, or anything that stood out to you in that respect?
Yeah, he's a solid passer. He got a couple of double teams, and then of course, just having Brad out there and Kuz out there, you got guys for knocking down open shots. There were times where they did double him when he had really good games. So, and also if he wasn't able to get an assist, he was able to pass it to the next man, and then they would just reverse the ball, just ball movement. So he's good at that. I think he's a solid passer. That's not his calling card, but he's not going to hurt you and turn the ball over. He's not really heist. There's times where I feel like he needs the ball more, but he's definitely able to find open shooters for sure. When guys try to trap him and move the defense toward him, he can definitely find open shooters. So if he did go to the Knicks, I could see him, finding like guys like Quentin Grimes for open shots, and some of the shooters that you guys got on your roster for sure. So I do think he's a talented passer. He's not going to wow you with any fancy passes, but he definitely makes the right decisions with the ball.
Yeah, and I think that's a step forward for him. And I think this is something, Ed, you were hinting at a little bit. I'm kind of curious about. Obviously, it wasn't necessarily the whole season or even the majority of the season that you guys had your big 3 together with him, Kyle Kuzma, Bradley Beal. But to the point of him getting lost in the second half at time, I think that would be my interest and also my concern on the Knicks, where you would be having this team, right, where Jalen Brunson is the clear-cut, no doubt about it, alpha dog. Julius Randle has every right to say, assuming you keep those two together, hey, I've made All-NBA 2 of the last 3 seasons. I'm the number 2 guy here. And I guess KP would have an incredible amount of value, in that the Knicks for years now have been looking for a big that can stretch the floor on one end and protect the rim on the other, right? Not a lot of guys in the whole NBA who can do that. It's Jaren Jackson, it's Anthony Davis every once in a while, it's Brook Lopez and Joel Embiid, and then Nikola Jokic kind of, and the list gets really, really short really, really quickly. And that's what makes him a unicorn. That's what makes him, in my mind, despite all the history there and the injury risk, potentially a perfect fit in New York, and with how paint heavy their offense is. Will he get lost in the background a little bit with all those guys? And then, like, assuming they don't deal him, you mix in an Emmanuel quickly. You mix in a Quentin Grimes, who's a burgeoning game. You mix in an RJ Barrett, who says, hey, I'm coming off of playoffs where I average 20 points per game pretty efficiently. Brandon, what do you think that would look like? And is there a world where KP gets a little bit lost? Or do you think he could slot in just right? And he would be content taking on kind of a tertiary role?
Well, I think what the difference between the Knicks and the Wizards, that, the reason why Brunson was able to come in and really see he was successful right on is because everybody knew the role.
Yep.
The Wizards nobody really knew their role. It was, at point guard, you had Monte Morris, where, at best we needed to push the pace, where he kind of slowed it down. He really didn't have the ability to drive the lane and really collapse the defense and utilize outside shooters. Sometimes we found it, especially in crunch time, Bradley Beal was bringing the ball up, where, a lot of turnovers in crunch time hurt us. So we didn't really solidify roles. It was kind of the rotations were kind of put together, and that really goes on Wes Unseld, the coach. So I think that New York, to really properly utilize KP, he's got in those role. He's got in those role, and again, imagine this: if he knew his role in DC, how successful could this team have been? Because again, he played at an all-star level. I mean, he was healthy and he was doing his thing, but I think that, just like Ed said earlier, there was times where, he was lighting up in the first half, and in the second half, he was an afterthought. And that just comes down to the fact that not a lot of plays were run for KP or Kuz. It was more, plays were being run for Bradley Beal. Obviously, at the time, he was our franchise player. So, again, I think just solidifying roles. He could be very successful in New York. And I'm with you. I think he would be a great move, because I think he can really complement Julius Randle in that front court. But that's the biggest thing to me, is just solidifying roles. Everybody knows their job and focuses on their job.
All right, guys, we'll be back one final time to wrap up this conversation on KP. And then I just wanted to get a gauge from the guys if they think the Knicks will get the draft pick the Wizards owe them over the next 3 seasons. But first, groceries, school shopping, and get a little something for yourself. You know you're already doing it, so why not get cash back for it with Ibotta? You can earn cash back on every shopping trip. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. A typical basket of groceries was over $50 more expensive at the end of 2022 than the beginning of the year due to inflation. You can earn 2.5 times that in cash back from Ibotta, or even more depending on how much you use Ibotta. The average Ibotta user earns $120 a year in real cash back. That could cover an entire shopping trip. Ibotta gives you real cash back, not points. Other apps gives you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKED. Yeah, what do you think about that, Ed?
Yeah, I think I do think coaching was a part of it. They just I don't know why they didn't make a point to get him the ball in the post at all. He would come out hot, knocking down threes in the first quarter and the second quarter, basically in the first half. But yeah, you would have to make it a point for him to get touches and get the basketball. Now, I do think some of it was some of the physicality. I think some teams tried to be a little bit more physical with him in the second half. And I think Julius Randle would be a guy where he could help him out with that, just kind of like some of the banging in the post and just freeing up Porzingis to kind of be around that three-point line, kind of around the mid-range. So Porzingis can really flourish from that part of the court. But yeah, I think you really have to really focus on getting him the ball, and you really have to focus your offense on getting him the ball. With Randle, kind of take a step back where it's like, hey, we got to get Porzingis the ball. We got to get him touches. With Jalen Brunson, take a step back and be like, hey, we got to get the big man a touch. We got to get him going. So that's a part of it too, because of course they wanted everybody to eat. They wanted Bradley Beal to get his shots up and get his plays in. They wanted Kuz to get his numbers too. So it was kind of like the offense was kind of like that at times, where Kuz was definitely getting his shots. There's a lot of shots where, I mean, there's a shot that Kuzma doesn't like to take, just to put it that way. And I love Kuz. Same thing with Brad. Brad's a willing passer as well, but will those guys take a step back to feed Porzingis? Will Tom Thibodeau make it a point to get Porzingis the ball? Because if you don't, then he kind of will get, I wouldn't say pushed out the way because of physicality, but he'll just kind of fall by the wayside and just get a little lost in the sauce sometimes when you're not focused in the offense on Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, I think ultimately if the Knicks traded for him, it might be wise to have another consolidation trade somewhere else, whether that's trying to turn Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett into like a Paul George type of guy. I don't know. But I do think there's a world there where the Knicks would need to do that, because if not, KP, you might not be getting your money's worth if he's not utilized properly offensively. But the other key there would be defensively, where I think there was a case to be made that Mitchell Robinson, same caveat as KP, when healthy, one of the better defensive bigs in the NBA. In the playoffs, the Knicks were the single best defense. That certainly had to do with their competition a little bit. But I think Mitchell Robinson, particularly in that Cavs series, you could argue he was the most impactful guy because of what he did as an offensive rebounder and what he did as a rim protector on the other end of the floor. That was an area for most of his career there were no questions about Kristaps Porzingis, right? I think he either led the NBA or was second in the NBA in blocks his first few years. You look at his block percentage, that's always high. It was pretty good in terms of stealing the ball as well. Those numbers went down a little bit this year. Brandon, what do you see from him on that end of the floor? And do you see him as a guy who's lost a little bit athletically on that end and just has to kind of rely on his size and positioning? And how would you kind of rate him in the scope of the league as a defensive rim protecting center?
Oh, good question, man. He's definitely up there with your defenders as far as defending the paint. There's you touch base, what's the difference? And I think it's not that he's not athletic, is that, like, again, with his size, with him being too athletic, it kind of opens him up for injury. So he's listening to his body. He's using more of his footwork. If you look at his footwork this year, his footwork is money. And that's why he was able to utilize his size in the paint, because he was able to utilize his footwork. So he's more of a savvy vet at this point. He's not trying to, be more athletic than he's using his basketball IQ. And I think that's the big difference with KP now, is that he's a savvy vet. He really utilizes his size down in the paint and not really trying to power anybody. Because, look, there's times where, when he goes against the Bam Adebayos and these bigger centers, he found it hard to kind of muscle him. So in years past, he kind of disappeared. Instead of doing that, he utilized the size, which is instead of trying to back him down and trying to outmuscle him, use those turnaround jumpers. He used that basketball IQ. So I think that even if he finds himself going against those bigger bigs where he's clearly being outmuscled, that his ability to stretch the floor and go out of it and backing up and hit those J's, I think he's going to be good in the long run. But defensively, he's still a rim protector. I mean, like I said, he can be outmuscled, but I had no problem with him being a rim protector because he utilizes his size, and he did a great this year. But I wouldn't look too much into his stats going down because I think that he's really underrated on the defensive end, in my opinion.
Ed, would the Wizards mostly just use him as like kind of a pure drop big? Were there any situations like where he'd be forced into switching onto guards, and like how does he hold up in those spots? Because the Knicks were pretty conservative with how they use Mitchell Robinson. And honestly, it really reminds me of KP, where Mitch was this athletic marvel early in his career. You could throw him out of James Harden. He was somehow getting to that step back three, even though Harden was like traveling like 5-6 feet back on it. And Mitch declined a little bit in that respect. And the Knicks switched up their defense, were very comfortable, just dropping him back. And I think that's how they would use KP too. But is there any scheme versatility there? Or do you think at this point in his career, like, all right, he's a guy we're going to have sink back towards the rim. He's going to have his arms high. They're going to be big, and he's going to be able to make an impact that way.
I think they use him as a draw big. We actually had two bigs out there. We would have Gafford and Porzingis. Porzingis, there were some situations where he did have to go there and guard some guards. He did an okay job of that. There were times it was some type of jump that Porzingis would do. I can't remember the jump, what it's called. But he would just jump up in the air.
The Luke Cornett jump?
Yeah, there you go. The Cornett jump.
The Eclipse, I think is what
it was something like that. So he would just do that to really get out there and disrupt shooters. And it actually did work from time to time. But as far as guarding guards, of course you don't want him out there. If it was the Wizards versus Knicks, and he's out there, he gets switched on Jalen Brunson. That's not a favorable matchup at all. But I thought he did a good job. And there were some games where we've talked about physicality a couple times already today, and Anthony Davis had 55 points against Gafford and Porzingis, where he just dominated both of those guys. They're just both thin frame guys. Jonas Valanciunas, every time he played against us, he had a double-double. There's so many games. Vucevic, he took advantage of the Wizards front court because they're thin frame guys. Mitchell Robinson is a thin frame guy, but you do have Julius at least for some physicality here and there. And Mitchell Robinson, he doesn't get pushed around much either. He did a pretty good job against Evan Mobley.
A lot. That was the difference where like it seems like with KP that just never fully happened, and Mitch like turned himself into like that used to be like we'd play Embiid and it would be all right 40 in the first half, and now not that he's locking guys like that down, but he can compete. And KP, I don't know if he ever quite got there.
Right, yeah. Evan Mobley, I saw that you guys did a good job against Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, kind of shutting those guys down. So there are going to be some nights where he goes against some bigs and defensively he will struggle because we got dominated a couple of times by some opposing bigs for sure.
Yeah, and I think that would be if as a Knicks fan, that would be my biggest concern. I assume that would be Leon Rose's biggest concern. You have Julius Randle, but in certain like you get the Sixers in the first round. Is that just the series with Embiid just bowling over those two guys game after game after game? And of course, even with Mitchell Robinson, that's a concern. So maybe the offense would mitigate it for the Knicks. But let's finish on the draft pick because that's what got me waking up, sweating in the middle of the night, being like, oh man, are we never going to get that pick? Is it just going to turn into 2 seconds? So we can go over the protections real quick on it. Obviously the Knicks did not get it this year. It is top 12 protected in 2024, top 10 protected in 2025, and top 8 protected in 2026. So I know you guys said the intention in Washington presumably is not to have an extended Sixer style rebuild. I assume it's to accumulate some picks, hopefully nail those picks the next 2 years. And presumably by 2026, you guys do not want to be picking in the top 8 in the draft. But in Washington, and I promise this isn't a shot because the same things would happen in New York, we're kind of built to let our fans down, right? For the Wizards, it's 50 years since the conference finals. For the Knicks, we had a little bit of a run in the 90s. It has not been good for a long time in other places. But Brandon, I think presumably you guys are happy that the Wizards are finally fully committing going down this road. I guess what I'm getting at is how long do they want to go down this road?
That's a good question because it really, I think the biggest thing and why we're disappointed with what we got from the Bradley Beal trade is you want to get assets off of these guys that you're not going to retain.
Yep.
So Bradley Beal was that guy where if it was anybody that you wanted to get assets from, it was Bradley Beal. And it's just disappointing. Now, I do think we could get a first rounder from KP if we decide to move on from KP. And, if we do a sign and trade for Kuz, we should, I think that you could net a first round pick for Kuz, depending on the situation. But I mean, it just depends. I mean, I have optimism because this front office. I mean, if we were still under Tommy Shepard, I'd be very worried because we could be in for like a 10+ year rebuild. But this front office knows how to evaluate young talent. They, coming from OKC, they know how they accumulate assets. I mean, it's just all the right things have been done in this front office. So realistically, if we're able to, within these next 2 to 3 drafts, get guys who can come in and develop as a core and build up from there, you could be looking at maybe contention in 5 years. I'm best case scenario, but it really depends on hitting on these draft picks. Because again, that has been something we have had the inability to do forever in DC. We the Jan Vesely's, the Chris Singletons. I mean, we've had so many drafts where think about this. We were in a position to get Klay Thompson at one point, Stephen Curry at one point. And you look at the year we got Denny Avdia, we had a chance to get Tyrese Halliburton. So we have to find these diamonds in the rough to accelerate a rebuild. And that's the biggest thing. So I think with this front office, I think we're in good hands because, again, they know how to find those diamonds in the rough and they know how to find talent in the draft. So realistically, I'm thinking 5 years to contention.
All right, Ed, I'll leave it to you. Can I sleep easy at night? Will the New York Knicks eventually get this pick, or will Washington be picking in the top 12 to top 8 the next 3 seasons?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it right now, and I think we probably will be around that time
you guys
too.
Are killing me.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to convey for you guys. I don't think it will, honestly. I think we're still going to have it. But speaking of Kristaps too, it just popped in my head. A light bulb just went on that. Reportedly, I don't know if you saw, but Kristaps and the 8th pick are possibly on the table for the 3rd pick of the draft from the Portland Trailblazers. Per Evan Massey. So that kind of drives up Kristaps' trade value as well. So you guys definitely have to come to the table with a really good offer, seeing that the Blazers are possibly willing to give up that 3rd pick of the draft.
All right. Well, my heart rate's elevated. You guys have not succeeded in calming me down, but this was a fantastic podcast all the same. Before I let you guys go, can you tell everyone where they can find Locked On Wizards and all your work?
Yes, sir. You can find us on YouTube. We just put up the Bradley Beal trade to Suns. I traded to the Suns video. That video right now has about 9,000 views. So you can definitely find us on Locked On Wizards on YouTube, wherever you guys get a podcast. If you type in Locked On Wizards on YouTube, you'll definitely find us. So thank you for having us on. All
right. Yeah. Everyone listening can tell two of the best hosts we have here at Locked On, Brandon Scott, Ed Oliver. And man, the Wizards are the team to follow from a Knicks perspective, from a league-wide perspective right now. So interesting. Everything going on there. Check them out on all podcast platforms. Do the same with Locked On Knicks, and we will talk to you guys soon.